Oui, Doctor's Watcher listeners. This is Ryan.
Bonjour, and this is Kyle.
And as you chew on your baguette, you are listening to
The Doctor's Watcher, the disease pathologists podcast about every episode of Doctor Who.
Oh, delicious. I don't know. That's not French. Damn it. So, how's it going, Kyle?
Doing pretty good. I have actually, I don't remember if I mentioned this on the podcast or not, but I recently reread The Hobbit for the first time in, probably 20 or 30 years.
Oh, cool.
And that was pretty fun. And so now I started rereading the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I'm still in Fellowship.
Awesome.
But I learned about something kind of cool and interesting that I'm doing as I read it. I actually learned about this a year or two ago at San Diego Comic-Con. I met the person who created it, and it's basically a Lord of the Rings soundscape. And it's, this thing that this guy created. I guess he specifically created it to pair with the official audiobooks, which are narrated by Andy Serkis.
Okay.
And so this guy made audio files that you can play alongside, as you're playing the audiobook files, where he's created all of this ambient background music that's, all inspired by the Howard Shore scores. But then there's also all of this background noise, when they're outside, you'll hear birds chirping, and
whoa.
In the first chapter, you hear the fireworks going off at Bilbo's party and the crowd all cheering and everything. And
awesome.
Yeah, so it's this whole, I don't even know how many hours of audio content it is, but a ton.
Yeah.
And
that's really cool.
Yeah, so I'm listening to that as I read. I'm doing the reading myself. I'm not listening to the audiobook. And I'm reading a bit faster than presumably the audiobook gets read. So the soundscape does get a little bit behind where I'm at in my reading, but it's available. When you buy the soundscape, you can access it in podcast form. So in the podcast app that I'm using to listen to it, I just basically have it set to 1.5 speed.
Nice.
So yeah, I think that's actually just a hair too fast, but then 1.25 is a hair too slow. So sometimes I'll kind of alternate between the two, but then sometimes I'll just listen in 1.25, and then, when I've read ahead, I'll just kind of stop reading for a minute and just listen and let the audio catch up.
That's cool.
But yeah,
does it really get you into the headspace and
yeah,
put
totally
you in the world?
Yeah, it's pretty immersive. The music itself, it does a fair amount, some nice ambient background music that sounds fantasy-like and Howard Shore soundtrack-like is nice. But then, if you're actually, tracking pretty closely in your reading and the soundscape, then, shit they open a gate and, you hear the creak of the gate. And, Tom Bombadil shows up and you hear, sort of his jolly voice kind of singing in the background and whatever. And oh, that's really cool.
Oh, rad. Yeah, that's super fun.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
So yeah, it's called A Long Expected Soundscape, created by this guy named Jordan Rannells. If you search for either of those, you should be able to find it. I guess he's also made a bunch of other soundscapes for various series. I think he did Wheel of Time. I think he might be doing A Song of Ice and Fire. I think he might have done Dune. So
super cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that would really, really add a lot to the experience. Like, when I was running D&D online, I was sort of toying with the idea of like setting up these soundscapes to sort of play in the background. Like while we played, they would just sort of be there coming from the computer,
right?
From the web page that we went to. But it was like really hard to manage the volume, and some of the players were just not tech savvy and couldn't figure out how to lower the volume of the soundscape, but not the volume of our Discord call and stuff. So I threw it out the window. But I think like in person games, that would really add a lot.
Yeah, totally.
And you have control.
When I met Jordan, the creator, at Comic-Con, like he actually told me that, like the soundscape itself, it comes in a bunch of different forms. Like there's the sort of full everything included version, which is what I'm listening to. But then there's also like a version that's music only, or like another version that's like sound effects only, or like ambient background sound only, and like, music plus sound effects, et cetera, et cetera.
That's a good idea.
And yeah, he actually told me that like a lot of people who buy it, like, sure, they might use it to listen to while they're reading Lord of the Rings, but they also, a lot of his clients or customers or whatever, actually will just use it for like background music during D&D sessions.
Awesome. Yeah, it just felt like it would probably be perfect for that kind of thing.
Yeah, totally.
Based on your description. That's rad.
And yeah, like if you kind of have an idea of sort of what arc your session might take, and you can find like, a chapter from the books that kind of has a similar emotional arc or whatever. And yeah, maybe it'll start out with like some pretty chill ambient background and then get into like, some pretty tense music and like, battles and shit. And
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, the main thing I wanted to bring up for this intro was wanted to give a shout out and deep thanks to listener John Fitzjimstone-ton. Thanks to John. He signed up for the highest level of Patreon, $3.50 a month, which means he has access to the custom nudes perk.
Nice.
So thank you, John. Wouldn't be able to do the podcast without you, and others like you who also want those custom perks.
Indeed, John, keep an eye out on your inbox and don't open that email in public.
Right. Certainly not at work. Unless you have a very interesting job. One more thing very quickly before we get into it. What do you call a person who has no body but only a nose?
What?
Nobody knows.
Nice. Nice. Very straightforward.
Yes. The punchline is right there in the joke.
Well, speaking of punchlines that are right in the joke, what do you call the second episode of the Doctor Who serial, The Moonbase?
The Moonbase episode 2.
Yep, exactly.
Nice.
This is the 24th episode of season 4. And unlike episode 1, this episode actually does exist in the BBC archives as 16mm film telerecording.
Nice.
I decided to read up on like what they actually mean when they say 16mm film telerecording. Mm-hmm. And I guess this is basically how the BBC would send episodes to overseas broadcasters. They would originally be filmed on video, basically like video cassette. Or I don't know if they had cassettes back in the 60s, but filmed on video. And then they would basically just, take a 16mm film camera and point it at a screen where they are showing the original video of the episode and like just record that. That's how they transferred it to film.
Dang, that sounds, I don't want to say lossy because that's more like transferring a wave to MP3. But that sounds very like problematic, but also endearing.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, they would just do this and make a master telerecording that, they could then just like copy the film itself, send it out to Australia and wherever else.
Nice. That's cute.
Yeah. So all that said, I actually found a colorized version of this episode and decided to watch that. I don't know if it was like official BBC colorized it at some point or if it's a fan-made colorization or what, but it was pretty fun.
Cool. I wonder if that's the one that I saw stills from, because I saw stills of like Jamie colorized and like, Polly and Ben. Like not very many of them, but I remember like the stuff Jamie, like he had a really cool scarf or something like that. Like,
oh, nice. Yeah.
Super like paisley, English hippie style.
Yeah, it could be like the video that I watched actually had a, like, this is the BBC splash screen at the start. So that sort of implies that it was a real thing, but I couldn't actually find any information on it, so I wasn't entirely sure.
That's cool.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah.
Would you remind us of our Cliffdingler?
Yeah, so lots of people are getting sick there on the Moonbase in the 2070s and trying to figure out what's going on there, but then and I'm just putting together, the doctor was screaming about not letting a silver hand get him. And we finally find out at the end of the episode that silver hand was probably a Cyberman hand, because a Cyberman shows up and has been doing like skulking around in the hospital or what, the sick bay, and I think stealing the bodies or something like that. I guess we don't exactly know, but there was a missing body and he was skulking, so I presume he's ganking those bodies.
Yeah, it seems like a pretty good assumption so far.
Mm-hmm. And I think we left them like in scene going like, oh crap, because they like see him and then the episode ends.
Right. Yeah, Jamie sees him and accuses the Cyberman of being the Phantom Piper, come to claim Jamie's life as a McCrimmon.
Right.
So yeah, Jamie is like moaning and mumbling at the Cyberman, which obviously he thinks is the Phantom Piper. And he's telling it that like he won't go with it. He's, no, I won't go with you. I won't, and whatever. The Cyberman is basically just like, all right, fine, whatever. and walks over to a different bed in sickbay and basically like picks the patient up off of this sickbay bed, just like kind of tucks him under his arm and leaves the room.
Okay.
So the Cyberman leaves just as Polly enters the room from the other end, and she screams because she like sees the last of the Cyberman leaving the room, basically. And the doctor shows up with Hobson. So Polly tells them both that another patient is missing from sickbay, and she thinks it was a Cyberman that took him. Hobson basically thinks this is bullshit.
Stop this Cyberman nonsense. There were Cybermen. Every child knows that, but they were all destroyed ages ago.
And yeah, Ben's...
Yeah.
Ben's
we
like,
thought
yeah,
that a few times.
I thought like we blew Mondas up. Like, weren't they all killed then? Hobson says,
Well, I do know one thing. A new disease starts, people disappear, and then you turn up.
So he...
Quick side note. Did we actually have a time frame reference for the Mondas serial?
That's a good question. I don't remember there being one.
Yeah, I don't either. I mean, I could be wrong, but I guess now we know that that's placed sometime before 2070.
Apparently sometime like a while ago, ages ago.
Yeah, like within memory, but not recent or anything.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like it would have had to have been long enough ago that like it's a story that you tell to scare your children now.
Yeah. Which, I mean, that could be, 100 years or something.
Mm-hmm.
Which would be like 1970s. But then there were space bases in that serial. Right? Wasn't that that was a space station or something, wasn't it?
I think they had a station in Antarctica, maybe.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And they had ships and stuff, but that's what I was thinking of. Yeah. Okay, interesting.
Yeah, so Hobson basically says that, like, he thinks that they caused everything or whatever, or are somehow related to everything. He's saying, a new disease starts, people disappear, and then you turn up.
Mm-hmm. Which kind of is rude, but not false.
So he basically tells them to GTFO. And Ben's like, all right, don't mind if I do. But the doctor's like, no, we can't leave yet.
Because there is something evil here, and we must stay.
Evil? Don't be daft.
Evil is what I meant. There are some corners of the universe which have bred the most terrible things. Things which act against everything that we believe in. They must be fought. This disease, for instance, it isn't really a disease at all. But I can help you with it. You'll see. I'll find the cause for you.
Oh, yeah. I think I'm starting to remember some of the Cyberman details from New Who, which is probably they got it from Old Who.
Probably,
okay. Yeah.
1 sec, I've got to let Matilda into the room.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to exclude her from the convo.
Hi, kitty. Meow. 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 Okay, she has a lot to say about Cybermen. So, yeah, the doctor's like, dude, GM, you made us play the fucking Moon Adventure, so we're gonna play the Moon Adventure. We're not just gonna leave after one episode.
Right.
And Hobson's like, all right, fine, whatever. You have 24 hours, and then you're gonna GTFO. So he points the doctor toward all the pathological equipment in the sickbay lab and sets him to work. Polly asks the doctor if he's really a medical doctor, and he's like,
Yes, I think I was once. Polly, I think I took a degree once in Glasgow. 1888, I think. Lister.
Uh-oh, that's like, too much blood level medicine.
I actually looked up Lister in this context, and I guess Joseph Lister did a lot of important work around like antiseptics and like fighting infection in the context of surgery.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, so he like pioneered a lot of modern surgical techniques at the University of Glasgow.
Nice.
And apparently the doctor studied under him.
Yeah, there's actually a very sad story. I won't get into it here about the first guy that figured out that washing your hands after surgery was a good idea. It's kind of a long story, and it's super sad. But listeners, if you're interested, you should go check that out because it's also very interesting.
Nice. Yeah, I think that's probably true of a lot of medical history. Very sad, but also pretty interesting.
Yeah. Like so much of it is fucking horrifying to be.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know why, but I tend to, I guess probably because it's so horrifying, those are the ones I tend to remember. And man, there is such horrifying things in medical history.
Yeah, seriously.
Anyway, that's way off topic now.
So the doctor gets to work. He starts swabbing the black marks on one of the patients to collect a sample, I guess. And he sends Ben and Polly to gather up all of the clothing, food, towels, soap, everything for him to start examining.
Have you any idea what it might be?
Nope, not an idea. But we'll find it out.
Nice.
Yeah, doctor going for the person of action here.
Yeah.
Back in the Moonbase control room, things are pretty out of whack. When they move the gravitron probe around, they don't see the weather results that they would expect to see on Earth based on the movements they're making. And they're not sure why not. Earth calls them up basically to tell them to get their shit in order. And Hobson's like, yeah, dude, we're fucking working on it. But Controller Rinberg on Earth is like,
well, there's no sign of any improvement here. We've just had a report from Miami, Florida. 30 minutes ago, they were enjoying clear skies and a heat wave. Now, Hurricane Lucy is right overhead.
Shit, that sounds kind of familiar.
The French guy, Benoit, thinks that they need to just shut the gravitron down entirely. But Hobby and Rinberg are both like, no fucking way. That would fuck the weather up like way worse than it already is and on a much larger scale. I guess, things are theoretically being controlled by the gravitron. So if you just like cut that off cold turkey, basically like shit's going to hit the fan real fast.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So they decide that they'd better just like carefully examine and test basically every single bit of their systems until they can figure out what's wrong. One of the side rooms off of the main control room is a computer room. And, this is a 1960s/2070s style computer room. So there are like big magnetic tapes on the, mounted on tape spools on the walls. There are all these control consoles and, chunky buttons and levers and switches and shit. Lots of lights, lights lighting up and everything.
I feel like we're kind of getting ripped off that computers don't still sort of look like that.
Yeah,
like
totally.
Scientific equipment.
Yeah. So Benoit and Niels head into the computer room to start checking shit out. And Benoit has to read a series of numbers, like off of one of the screens or whatever. And Niels is going to confirm these numbers and make sure that they're the correct numbers. And so while Benoit and Niels are doing this, the doctor shows up in the room and he starts using this sort of like tweezer-like, tongue-like grabber device to pull a few threads out of Benoit's shirt. And then he starts pulling some threads out of Benoit's trousers. And Benoit doesn't notice until the doctor's basically like finishing up his collection of these samples. And when Benoit does notice, he starts yelling at the doctor in French, or in foreign, as Ben would say, and calls him an idiot and tells him to get out of the way. And the doctor's just like,
Enchanté, monsieur.
Nice.
uh-huh.
Yeah, it's always funny when French people get angry and they're like, "Oh, puta de merde." That kind of sounded more Italian, but I don't know. Les Foucaults. This is Operative 23 sending a message from Resistance Outpost Alpha Charlie Alpha Bravo. I have a critical request which will help bolster the strength of our resistance forces. You must recommend the Doctor's Watcher to everyone you know. Friends, family, co-workers, even the person you sometimes see on the bus. This is the only way for our people's movement to succeed. Share the podcast and leave good reviews. If you do not do this, we will be forced to resort to...
So Benoit and Niels head back into the main control room. They need to start checking the fluid servo pressures. And as they're doing this, the doctor kneels down to the ground and starts untying the laces of one of Niels's boots. Hobson kind of comes over and just like stands behind the doctor, who either doesn't notice or doesn't care. And then like Niels is about to like walk over to another area of the room, and the doctor like holds on to Niels's boot, and Niels just like steps out of his boot and walks away.
Nice. Like he doesn't notice at all what's happening.
Yeah, he's like too involved in like checking the fluid servos. So Hobson is just like, dude, what the fuck? And the doctor's like,
I'm just collecting specimens.
and he rolls the d20, and then Hobson's like,
Specimens? Oh, yes. Well, get on with it.
Oh, good roll. Good roll.
we cut back to sickbay, where they are apparently running out of a particular medication. So Ben goes to ask Hobson where he can find some more of it. And while Ben is gone, Jamie starts waking up again and asking if he's in the home of the Piper. And Polly's just like, nah, we're still just on the moon. But then a Cyberman shows up. Polly, kind of starts like circling around it, like trying to stay away or whatever, and like starts heading toward the door. But the Cyberman raises its arm and zaps her with its electricity bolt and knocks her unconscious. And then it turns back towards Jamie and electrocutes him as well, knocking him unconscious. But then instead of like picking Jamie's body up and walking out of the room with it, it goes over to a different sickbay bed and collects that patient and walks out of the room with him.
What does it sound like when he zaps all these people? Is it like a zzzt, or
I think so,
yeah. Sound, or like what's it like?
Yeah, I think it was basically just kind of a standard like sort of thing.
Okay, cool.
The doctor arrives back in sickbay a few moments later after the Cyberman's gone and, you know, rushes over to check up on Polly, make sure she's okay. Meanwhile, the Moonbase technicians are still running a bunch of tests. They're trying to figure out like what's wrong with the gravitron system, but they have not found the fault yet. One of them reports to Hobson that there was a slight air pressure drop. Apparently this has happened a few times recently, but it seems to only last for like a few seconds before the air pressure is restored to its correct levels.
Weird.
So yeah, this has
like
been
a door opening and closing.
Something, yeah. Yeah, it's happened a few times. They don't know why, but definitely a weird thing. The camera operators and the episode editors are like, we know why. So they cut over to the storeroom where we see that there are a bunch of bags of supplies kind of like piled up against the wall. And then this bag of supplies gets collapsed, like it gets pushed over because there's actually a big hole in the wall that this bag of supplies is covering. And like a Cyberman enters the base through this hole in the wall and then like basically stacks the bags up to block the hole off again.
That's very stealthy.
And, you know, it must be like a very careful stack in order to be like airtight against the hole in the wall.
Yeah, really.
It's just like
there's just some
sacks
like, nice
of sugar and whatever. Yeah.
Huh. So if you think about it, like presumably, you know, the Cybermen's ship is on the other side, or there's like a, you know, some kind of a tunnel or something leading to the ship. And if the inside of the base is pressurized and there's like a sugar sack blocking the, you know, hole to the leading out, I bet, you know, the Cyberman's, tunnel or his ship or whatever's on the other side of that hole, it's got a nice, like, sweet kind of candy store smell to it.
Yeah, that's probably true. So the Moonbase technicians actually do manage to figure out that there are some pieces missing from one of the gravitron probe's control antennae. So I guess that's like what's causing the problems with the gravitron. They speculate about like maybe a meteorite hit the antenna, but Hobson's like, maybe it was these PCs who showed up an episode ago when shit started happening.
I mean, that's fair.
Yeah.
Not unreasonable.
So Hobson is about to basically go find the doctor and tell him, like, GTFO, no, really, for real this time. But before he can do this, Ben shows up and tells him that another patient is missing from sickbay again. And Hobson's just like, fuck.
Poor Hobby.
Yeah. So they all start heading down to sickbay, but first he sends a couple techs out to the lunar surface to like check out the broken antenna in person. The doctor is still in the sickbay laboratory, basically. He's examining shit on microscope slides, but he's not finding anything. He tells Polly that like the whole base seems basically sterile. Like there's not like bacteria or germs like in the Moonbase at all, basically. She starts kind of like carefully suggesting that maybe his medical knowledge is out of date.
Well, I mean, you did say that you took your degree in Glasgow in 1888. It does seem an awful long time from now, 2070 or whatever it is.
Polly, are you suggesting that I'm not confident to carry out these tests?
Oh, no. I was just wondering if there was anything that Joseph Lister didn't know in 1888 that might possibly help you now.
Yeah, well, smart. Very smart.
But then the doctor sees Ben and Hobson coming, like, in the corridor. So he's like,
"Look busy! Quick!"
And when Hobson arrives, the doctor's, like, carefully examining his microscope slides. He asks Polly for another boot. She goes and grabs it for him. He's examining the boot. He's basically, like, half ignoring Hobson, who's like trying to tell him to GTFO. And then the doctor is suddenly like,
You found something?
I think perhaps I have.
Really?
Yes, I may be onto something, but I must have some room. How can I work under these conditions? Now, please, come along outside. I'm trying to work in here. Ben, see that they stay outside.
Nice.
Yeah,
That's
totally.
It's called a GTFO reversal.
And yeah, there's a couple of quick dice rolls. The GM's like, yep, you reversed the GTFO on me. And Ben escorts Hobby out of sickbay.
Excellent.
Polly, as soon as Hobson and his other dudes are gone, Polly asks the doctor if he's really found something. And of course he hasn't.
Oh, Polly, I only wish I had. Why not make some coffee to keep them all happy while I think of something?
Nice.
Yeah, so Polly goes off to make the coffee.
Nice.
We check in with the two technicians that Hobson sent to examine the antenna on the surface. They are on the lunar surface set in the studio. They're wearing their spacesuits, and they approach the antenna. And this was the point that I realized that the lunar surface set is a different scale than I had thought it was earlier. There's like a couple of craters that I thought were like pretty big, but they're actually just like a couple of feet across. When we see him like next to a person. The antenna itself that they're going to examine is probably like 6 or 7 feet high. But they kneel down and start examining, some of the equipment at the base of the antenna. They start to test it, and two Cybermen show up behind them and like hit them, I guess. It's like a very close-up shot where we kind of see the Cybermen like raise their arms and bring them down, but we don't see if they're like holding anything, or like we don't see the technicians in frame or anything. We just see the Cybermen like doing a hit action.
Like the G.I. Joe, like karate chop arm thing.
Yeah, basically.
Nice.
So yeah, I guess the two technicians are unconscious now.
Dope.
The doctor steps out of sickbay. Hobson is still like in the corridor waiting, basically. And he tells Hobby that he hasn't found like anything at all, basically. I wasn't sure like why he's revealing this, because he's supposed to be like figuring out the disease, but
Right.
he tells Hobby that he hasn't figured it out. And just then Polly shows up with the tray of coffee, and the doctor suggests that, like, let's all just have a cup of coffee and like chill out for a bit, basically. Hobby
Kind of makes me want coffee. Anyway.
Yeah, I might make some after we're done recording.
Yeah, sounds
Have
good.
another cup.
Yeah.
Hobby sends Benoit outside to go check on the two technicians, and the camera immediately cuts to two empty spacesuits just lying on the lunar surface near the antenna.
What are they doing with all these bodies?
A good question.
Nobody knows. Sorry.
Nice. That's very appropriate because the Cybermen don't have noses.
Yeah, nice. No nose body.
Uh-huh. We cut back to the coffee break that's happening outside of sickbay. Polly is pouring cups for everyone. She, adds some sugar to Hobby's at his request. And then a technician in the background of the shot with a cup of coffee moans and collapses, and the black lines immediately spread across his hands. So Ben and a couple of other technicians carry him into sickbay. The doctor urges them to be careful not to touch his skin. And so they get him carried off into sickbay, and the doctor and Hobby and Polly all sit back down to enjoy their cups of coffee. But then the GM asks the doctor to roll an insight check, and the camera focuses on the sugar dispenser for a moment, and then the doctor knocks Hobson's cup of coffee out of his hand just before Hobson takes a sip.
Oh.
Don't drink that! It's the sugar! Don't you see? That's why the disease doesn't affect everyone. It's the sugar. Not everyone takes it.
Good thinking, Doc.
Yeah, totally.
I guess I would be immune to that because I also don't take sugar in my coffee.
Yeah, same.
Nice.
So the doctor uses forceps to carry the sugar container back into sickbay. He's being very careful not to actually touch it directly. And he examines the sugar under the microscope, and sure enough, there's a large neurotropic virus in it.
Ooh. What does neurotropic even mean?
They don't actually say that.
Huh. That sounds bad.
Uh-huh.
Like the space plague?
No. It's a large infective agent that only attacks the nerves.
I guess that's what neurotropic means, maybe.
That's why the patients have got these lines on their faces and their hands. It follows the course of the nerves under the skin.
Okay.
I guess earlier when he told Ben and Polly to bring him samples of all of the food and clothing and everything, I guess they forgot sugar. but they figured it out now, so it's all fine.
Right. Well, I guess sugar's more of an ingredient than a food.
Yeah, that's fair. The doctor tells Hobson that he thinks the Cybermen have deliberately infected the base. And Hobson's like, dude, my men searched the whole base and they didn't find any Cybermen, and how would they get into the base anyway? It's not like there's a hole in the food storage wall with a bunch of sacks of sugar stacked up next to it or anything.
Right.
The doctor's like, did they ever search here in sickbay? And it turns out they didn't. So the doctor's like, all right, I'm going to roll an investigation check then. So he starts poking around the room and eventually finds that one of the sickbay beds, these beds all have like bodies covered with a sheet or a blanket or whatever. And one of the beds has giant silver boots poking out from like the bottom end of the blanket. So everyone's like, oh shit. And they start backing away from it. And a moment later, the body on the bed flings the sheet off of itself and gets up. And of course, it's a Cyberman. And it looks like it draws like some sort of handheld device that we assume is a weapon. I'm not sure why it's not just using its like electrocution that's built in, but it draws something and points it at them. And the music plays and the words say Doctor Who, Patrick Troughton.
Ooh. Well, that's very, like, kind of cute and childlike. The Cyberman was like, oh shit, I gotta hide in the bed. Let me pull the covers over me like a kid would.
Uh-huh.
Oh no, my feet are sticking out. Well, that's cool. I like how it's sort of, half mystery, but not really a mystery that, we could figure out. But it's like half mystery for the Doctor, half, thriller, I guess.
Yeah, totally.
With the sci-fi vibe.
Yeah. Yeah, they're kind of setting up this whole mystery and trying to figure out what the disease is and everything. And then, simultaneously setting up like, oh, there are Cybermen here. And now we're kind of bringing the two plots together, I guess.
Yeah. Like the Cybermen do seem to be slowly picking off and stealing the bodies of the people there. And somehow we're sure it's all connected, but we still don't know exactly yet how.
And apparently like they want the bodies, but they don't want the spacesuits, I guess. And I
guess the cyber suit would kind of take care of that. Like if they are presumably going to be turning these bodies into more Cybermen or whatever.
Yeah.
Like their suit probably
the cyber
is
suit
good for,
should handle that.
For like not zero G, but no atmosphere or whatever.
Right. Yeah, I did think it was a little funny that they apparently like took the time to get the unconscious bodies out of the spacesuits like while they were still on the lunar surface at the antenna instead of like carrying them back to the cyber ship and then getting the bodies out of the spacesuits.
Right. That would make more sense, but I guess a bit less dramatic for the show.
Yeah. Maybe the body is just like right up to the edge of their carry limit. So like with the spacesuit on, it's too heavy.
And they were like, I don't want to play, inventory Tetris again.
Right.
So we barely left enough space just for the body.
It would take too long for us to both carry one body back and then come back for the other one. It's definitely like faster and easier and more efficient to take the spacesuits off here.
Right. Well, this is a good serial. I'm really enjoying it. I'm trying to recall what it sounds like when Cybermen talk, and hopefully we'll get to hear that later.
I guess
I remember it's a bit closer to like a stereotypical like robot voice or something like that, but I'm not totally sure about that.
Yeah, we haven't heard any yet this serial, but yeah, in their first serial, in the 10th Planet, they were like kind of sing-songy robot voices, if I remember right.
Yeah, that sounds
sort of like
right.
did weird pitches and intonations. So,
which is kind of the MO for Doctor Who robot-esque bad guys.
Yeah, totally.
Well, awesome. Any further notes on this episode?
Nope, not this time.
Cool. All right, then. Well, that's very fun. Glad that Matilda got to contribute a few notes as well. And can't wait until we resume next episode to see what happens with the Cyberman just drew on our heroes and what their overall plan is.
Yeah, totally.
Well, listeners, if you're interested in, continuing to be amazed by this awesome story and our professional and also very entertaining descriptions and reactions to said story, please tune in again in 2 weeks. Share, like, and subscribe. And as stated previously, you can share to anyone, random people you meet on the bus, the person who checks you out, when you're buying your groceries, and the person at the deli counter, because they're nice also, I'm sure.
Yeah, totally.
Make sure that they all, subscribe and leave good reviews and contact us via the usual methods in case they have questions, comments, Patreon, custom nude requests, etc.
Indeed. And yeah, some other podcast I've listened to recently was talking about how apparently people these days listen to podcasts on YouTube, which I find very strange, but I believe the Doctor's Watcher does have a YouTube account, and I think it even works correctly. So,
cool.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
I don't know if anyone has ever listened to our podcast on YouTube. There's no video to go along with it, just like, the splash screen from our podcast platform or whatever, but
nice.
Go if you know any Zoomers who like YouTube a lot or whatever, you can send them our podcast that way.
Yeah, it's not on TikTok, sorry, but oh well.
Maybe someday, probably not.
Right. It'll just be like a very long series of 60-second clips that add up to the full episode.
None of which have any actual video content.
Right. That's how you succeed on TikTok for sure.
Totally.
All right, cool. Well, I will see you listeners and see you, Kyle, in 2 weeks for the next episode.
Sounds good. Bye.
All right. Bye.
There is only one thing to do.
What's that?
Shut it down.
What, switch the gravitron off?
Yes, it's the only chance.
We can't do that, man. The collapse of the gravity would devastate half the globe. There'll be storms, whirlwinds, hurricanes.
I overheard your conversation. It's quite out of the question. You're not to shut down the gravitron under any circumstances. And that's an order. I think perhaps you don't appreciate how serious the situation already is.
I bet he gets a knighthood.
We spent years in the General Assembly negotiating methods of agreement between farmers, landowners, and so on. And now the weather's out of control, they're after our blood. And I must say, I can't blame them. You've got to get that thing under control. Quick. Now please get on with it.
Earth control, over and out.